Good evening, everyone. We'd like to call this meeting to order. The Joint Austin Arts and Music Commission, Monday, September 24th, here at the Doris Miller Auditorium.
And my name's Gavin Garcia. I'm the chair of the Music Commission.
I'm Jaime Castillo, chair of the Arts Commission.
And we'll start with Amy. If you would, we'll go in a circle if you want to introduce yourself and who your council member is. I'm with Councilmember Greg Casar, District 4. And if you could use the mic and you just push the button, the light turns green as we go forward.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay. Amy Malk. I'm on the Arts Commission, District 10, Councilwoman Altus District.
I'm Orrin Rosenthal, also District 10, Music Commission, representing Allison Alter.
My name is Felipe Patricio Diaz Garza. I'm representing Sabino Pio Renteria, District 3.
My name is Chrissy Reeves. I'm District 7, Arts Commission, representing Leslie Poole.
My name is Elizabeth McQueen. I am also District 7, the Music Commission, representing Leslie Poole.
I'm Brett Barnes, Arts Commission, representing District 4, Greg Casar.
Hi, I'm Elisa McCain, and welcome to District 1. I represent District 1, or Houston's district, and thanks for coming out tonight.
I just wanted to say I'm District 2, De La Garza, Arts Commission.
Michelle Polgar, Arts Commission, appointed by Mayor Steve Adler.
Graham Reynolds, Mayor's appointee, Music Commission.
Lulu Flores, District 9, Mayor Pro Tem Kathy Tova's appointee.
I'm Stuart Sullivan, District 5, Council Member Ann Kitchens, Music Commission.
Trina Barlow, Music Commission, District 8, Ellen Troxclair.
Thank you, commissioners, and appreciate you being here tonight.
So before we get into citizen communication, I want to be clear that first of all, most of us are here for the joint meeting, Arts and Music, and therefore citizen communication. If you signed up to speak to that, we'll call up the list so we can call you. But then in case you're here for specifically the Arts Commission agenda item after the meeting, you can sign up at any time, but we will call you at the conclusion of our joint meeting. So I just wanted to be clear about that.
Also, the items that we'll have tonight under 3A, 3B, and 4A will the sign-in sheets at the front door. You can continue to sign in those and speak on those items until we conclude that order of business. And with that, we will go into the citizen communication. So, do we have the list from the front door? Okay. And the speakers will be allowed a 3-minute allotment to address their concerns regarding items not posted on the agenda. We'll use this microphone to our right. And again, at this point, the commissioners are not allowed to engage the speaker in a discussion.
Sweet. Dan Redmond from Mosaic Sound Collective.
What's this for? It's an awesome. Sure one.
Good evening, commissioners and staff. I am Dan Redmond with Mosaic Sound Collective. I know you have a busy agenda, a big challenge ahead of you tonight, and I appreciate the opportunity to present an update on Mosaic Sound Collective. Our project was launched in 2015 when we began repurposing our 25,000 square foot mixed-use property in East Austin near the intersection of MLK and 183. I think most everyone's been there. Mosaic, we have a creative hub that provides affordable space, valuable resources, and professional services for Austin's creative community. We are currently home to 13 unique small businesses, each supporting Austin artists and contributing to the collective. Each of our tenants and partners share a common goal to provide musicians and artists with the tangible tools they need to build a sustainable career. One of the exciting things we have going on at Mosaic right now, and timely in the sense that there was an announcement that I guess both music labs are raising the prices and possibly for sale, and we will soon be opening our rehearsal studios and have 25 rehearsal studios available for artists coming up soon. We've also hosted a couple of displaced artists from Pump Project. We had a nonprofit, Aid Services of Austin, that was waiting to go into their new place. So we have done our best to provide our space to artists and musicians. I know there are plenty of differing opinions, discussions, and competition for a lot of the discussions and agenda items tonight. And the main reason I'm here is just to make sure that we're in your minds when it comes to recommendations for funding initiatives, grants, anything that we can do to help push our mission forward with council and with the Music and Arts Commission. The presentation I passed out to you is an overview of where we are currently with Mosaic. And again, we hope to just continue to be part of the conversation, and if there's anything we can do to support artists, musicians, and the community, we'd like to do that. We're not just talking about how to make a difference, we're actually acting and doing it. So we appreciate your support. We've been fighting the good fight with little to no outside financial help at this point, and we'd love to imagine a time and a place where we can actualize a lot of the initiatives and a lot of the revenue streams that we're trying to accomplish at Mosaic. In closing, I just wanted to say thanks for all of your support. I appreciate all of the service and everything you guys are doing for the community. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we have Sharon Marroquin from Ballet East. Okay. Sam Jacobson from Artifact Austin.
Hello. Hi, I'm Sam Jacobson. I'm a local artist and maker, and I'm here today representing a new organization called Artifact Austin. We're essentially trying to compile a place for artists of all shapes and sizes, any category under the sun, to be able to find a place to go, to find real life facts about what's happening in our local politics in regards to policies for artists, funding, just kind of making a more accessible place for people to be informed about what's happening locally. So it's not like an overwhelming influx of, our news today. So we're currently working on two main initiatives. The first one's the Get Out the Vote campaign. We're trying to just push as much as we can before the upcoming election to get people more informed about what's happening so that when they vote, they're informed, and they're informed all the way down the ballot and not just, based on biases. It's also going to be nonpartisan and, very non-biased. The second initiative is we're getting our website together, so if anyone would like to support us and help us research kind of just getting the policies on the site, just so, the more eyes we have, the better. So that's essentially, I just wanted to let you guys know about that and to keep your eyes peeled for us, because we're hoping for it to be a really community-driven space. Thank you.
Thank you. That's it for general.
Okay, so that's it for our Citizens Communication General. We'll move to the Chair's report. I want to make a note. I see in front of me there is an event here We are actually privileged to be at the Doris Miller Auditorium. There's a lot of history in this place with the creative sector historically, and that continues on September 27th, 2018, on Thursday night. There will be performances here by Lily B., the Peterson Brothers, and Darius Jackson. This is an Austin Parks and Rec and Cultural Arts supported event called Chitlin Circuit Revisited, 6 p.m., September 27, 2018. Well done, producers. I also wanted to note tonight, I believe it's the third joint meeting of Arts and Music Commissions in history, all of which have occurred recently, and I think the development and direction is apropos. Again, we've been fortunate to have folks at the Economic Development Department that have led this opportunity to generate positive energy, and part of that yield is why we're here tonight discussing some of the items that we're about to take up. So I'm very honored to sit with the arts commissioners and value them for the work they do throughout the year. The music and arts community is now blending more than ever in philosophy and in engagement with the municipality. So I'm very fortunate, again, to welcome this year, after being awed by former Chair Lulu Flores, we now have at this meeting the Chair Jaime Castillo, and welcome tonight to our first meeting as Chair. Thanks.
Thank you. I just wanted to echo some of what you said. You know, our communities are intermixed. We're all creative. We all have the same needs. And with this meeting specifically, I wanted to make sure that both of our communities have the same information in terms of what we as commission and what staff is doing in terms of providing programs and solutions to the issues in our communities. So thank y'all for being here.
Okay, we'll go ahead and take up item 3A. This will be special presentation period. We have the Economic Development Incentives Unit, Incentives, Tools, and Loans with Economic Development Department staff joining us.
Hello, Rebecca Giello, Interim Director of Economic Development, and I'm joined here with Christine McGuire, and she is the Manager of Redevelopment Services with the department. I just want to take an opportunity really to thank all of you. I've had an opportunity to work with a number of you over the course of the last few weeks, particularly on one of the issues on the agenda. And I have been so deeply impressed by the commitment that you have and the leadership, quite frankly, that you are bringing to the table tonight. So I always want to take an opportunity to thank everyone for their volunteerism and to recognize just the incredible leadership you bring to the topic. That said, I also want to thank the staff who has been working over the weekend for several weekends as well as the evenings to continue to be such an incredible capacity for you all. I'd like to just take an opportunity to review with you the economic development policy. As many of you were involved and have been involved over the course of about 18 months, the department has been championing a revision and really a revitalization effort of its economic development initiatives through Chapter 380. For those of you who may be new to the conversation, Chapter 380 of the Texas Government Code provides cities opportunities to create economic development agreements that enable incentives for economic development. And these look similar throughout cities in Texas, but as Austin often does, we like to push the envelope, and the creativity and the ideas that have come from the community have done just that. So you have a one-pager. I didn't want to take too much time, recognizing your agenda is somewhat packed. But just know that we do believe that we will be a presence at both of the commissions as we work through the new programs coming out of the new policy. And so although this may be brief, we anticipate a presence with you all along the way, and certainly recognizing and continuing to value you as key stakeholders in the creation of a number of the initiatives and programs that we will now see. For those of you who have been with us on the journey and who really helped us with the council action on August 30th, this won't be new, but I do want to take an effort just momentarily to walk you through what led up to August 30th. The 2018 economic development approach is different. It has taken a look at what we call now, through the guiding principles, new values that will drive programs coming out of the economic development policy. The department has for a very long time just kind of dubbed that and nicknamed that Chapter 380. We are now calling this the economic development policy of the city of Austin, born and created through the avenue of Chapter 380. The new values that were led and culminated and rose to the top because of the stakeholder feedback are it actually is, and won't surprise you very much, exemplifying Austinites. I'm going to just go through them 1 through 8. You have them there in the blue box to the right. A true prioritization of locational enhancements, a prioritization around workforce development, quality jobs, equity and diversity, quality investment, transportation, City of Austin revenue focused, and hiring practices that certainly recognize all levels of incomes in Austin. And the approach, being diversified and balanced, are born really from the pillars of equity, affordability, and opportunity. That said, if you drop down to an image, what you basically now see is a Chapter 380 horizon that creates a much more diversified and vibrant approach from business recruitment and business expansion, which has been the primary focus of the City of Austin's 380 efforts, all the way now to embrace workforce development, small local business support, creative sector, real estate support, social enterprise and support and connections, and community health and revitalization. What happened on August 30th was fairly monumental, quite frankly. I want to recognize, again, the community's effort for almost 2 years to get council comfortable with an incentive program that has this kind of diversity and a touch along the spectrum of those services. The council approved the guiding principles, again, really creating the pillars of the policy. They approved the policy. They also approved the first program coming out of that policy, and they paved the way for the second program coming out of the new policy, which we'll talk a little bit about, called the Location Enhancement Program. What's next, coming from the August 30th steps, are defining the terms and conditions of those programs. The Location Enhancement Program, which we want to talk with you about right now, will involve a stakeholder discussion. It will also involve codification of the actual program. So I've worked for the city for a number of years. I've come from a background of working with departments that have program guidelines. The program guidelines don't necessarily have to go through a codification program, but this department has really reached in and identified a transparency philosophy that not only takes program creation through a stakeholder process that's very vivid and transparent, but it also goes to council so that it's truly a codified system, allowing for council to weigh in and a stakeholder input process that further evolves the program to the very end of council approval. So what's next, and what I believe that this group will play a very key role in, is the creation of the location-based program, which is a gap financing for affordable commercial space. So in the housing department, we actually have gap financing programs to create incentive programs for renters and incentive programs for homeowners. But what hasn't existed is to actually create incentive programs for commercial space, which can cultivate opportunities for creatives, small business owners. And I think that this is going to resonate very deeply with the communities that you're representing. So a little bit about what the program is. It is providing incentive payments to help fill the gap between the development cost of real estate projects and its revenue in order to build, remodel, and/or fill a space with a business that meets council-approved goals and resonates, obviously, with the principles coming from the policy. It encourages real estate transactions that develop community benefits in different places. One, land uses that meet council-approved social goods, such as affordable housing, venues for arts, healthy food retailers, higher density transit-oriented developments are just a number of examples. Two, it offers long-term affordable tenant space for small local businesses, space for arts organizations and creative businesses. Three, specific geographic areas that are of strategic importance will be stressed in the program creation, thus the name location-based program. The program guideline development will follow the same steps that you saw coming out of the economic development policy with the first program, which is we'll be working with our commissions, our boards and commissions as subject matter experts. We will also be commissioning a consultant for market analysis to support the guideline development. We will have stakeholder meetings to inform the program guidelines, and again, we'll be taking the program through an adoption process so that the program is an ordinance at the end of the process. We'll be returning to council in December for an update, and we'll be working with you all along the way. We are prepared, and Christine will be leading this in her shop. We're prepared to answer any questions, or we will certainly take direction from the chairs with any future presentations you all may want from us, recognizing that your time tonight is somewhat tight. But we do stand ready to continue, even on a quarterly basis, to come and let you know what our progress is.
Commissioner Flores.
Thank you. Just a quick question. I know you're making a report with an update to council in December. Those 3 steps that you outlined above that, how long was that process? Do you estimate that whole process is going to start so that programs can get launched?
So you're asking the question that council has been asking us along the way, and I am a peacemaker, people pleaser, and a Taurus, and a middle child. So I am going to pass the mic so that I don't say something that over-obligates staff who will pinch me. And Christine, having been, working through this process quite a bit, I think will give you a far more realistic depiction.
Thank you.
She passes the mic to a Taurus, a middle child, and a shared birthday. So, yes. My goal is to have in early spring policy adoption. That said, what is really important is that we get this right. And I think what is really important is to be able to answer some fundamental questions, such as, what is affordable and for whom? And at the federal level, we have that answer. It is a well-trodden federal policy of area median family income. For artists and the creative community, we don't have that very specific metric that everybody agrees. So what is really important is that the market analysis, we don't short shrift. Another very key point is that the private sector, in terms of underwriting, in terms of risk expectations and reward expectations, does not see all of Austin the same way. There are parts that are traditionally more economically disenfranchised that have not seen the kind of investment that we should look at differently than areas in the market that are smoking hot, where there is a little bit more leverage in terms of expected returns and awards. And that also means the costs are different. So we need to know what the private sector's view of risk and reward is and be able to come up with an incentive policy that aligns risk and reward from the public sector lens to get the kind of space that's deeply affordable for a long period of time that we know is important for the arts community. So I say all that, saying that if it takes longer to do the market analysis and true this up in close work with the key folks that we are trying to deliver space for, then that will happen. But that is the goal, and I know everybody's chomping at the bit, and nobody is chomping at the bit more than everybody here in this room. We know that every single minute, every single week, we hear an announcement, and I know that me and my colleagues that I sit to my right and my left in staff meetings feels the same thing too. We're absolutely passionate about it. That said, we're also having other programs such as ASAP and other programs that we're talking about internally to help fill some of these interim measures and gaps. We understand, we're passionate about that, and we're committed to this process.
Spring.
So that, I just want to be clear, that's for arts and music, not just arts.
Yes, yes, yes.
Commissioner Garza.
Thank you and welcome. You guys are talking about affordable housing in some of these programs and location-based programs. One thing I know for a fact, having lived here in Austin for over half of my life, is that the road to gentrification, especially in East Austin, is paved with good intentions. You look at the UT Blacklands program, they came out, they built Dishfalk Field, improved some housing, and bam, the black community has been cut in half. You look at the gas tanks, you look at the Holly Power Plant. Again, these are programs where folks were, the promise was we're going to protect the community, and bam, once again, the Hispanic community has been wiped out. The poor folks have been moved out of that community. You toss around the word affordable housing, but I did not hear the term Section 8. That is one term I did not hear. Hold on, before you kick your little slip around. Now, working as an educator, I know that there are teachers who qualify for Section 8, who qualify for food stamps. There are people working at Walmart, exact same thing. There are artists, the exact same thing. What are we doing to protect and make sure that those folks are not displaced, that when we put something into the community, that we don't jack up the taxes on the people, poor people who live around there, which some folks are saying, let's put some people at St. John, let's do some stuff at off of Riverside where the poor people live, and let's see what happens then. Because so far, it has been piss poor as far as the planning goes. So I really want to hear some more about what you plan to do to protect the poor people, the poor working people in this community, because I didn't hear that. Thank you.
Your points are very important, and they're also timely, and when we talk about investment, public investment, which is patient capital in areas of our city, immediately that is the city signaling either in a specific real estate transaction on a specific piece of parcel, and that's the thing about real estate. It's a place, and it's surrounded by homes, it's surrounded by other businesses. And so you have to ask the question, what is the public good that's coming from that specific transaction? Additionally, what you're getting to is what are the unintended consequences about the increase in property values around
Exactly,
it?
economic impact statements and projections.
Absolutely, and it's also in some ways what we intuitively know, especially like if we have city-owned properties that are in areas, and I'll just say, for example, now you're going to hit me underneath the table, and that's quite okay. So now this is me riffing. So we have 208 acres between Lakeside and Colony Park. Neighborhoods where the city is actually procuring a master developer. That's something that our department is doing. It's not part of the 380 program, but again, it's signaling city participation with a private entity in an area that has the concern that we don't want it to be another vehicle of gentrification.
Right, right. And this is my point. Now, we had some folks come by several months ago. Now, let's take this as a community, and this is some city-owned property or whatnot that has zero tax base. Now, everybody around here is either struggling to pay their taxes or very, very poor and barely paying their taxes. Now, all of a sudden, bam, we put this fancy new stuff going up, which is going to jack up the entire taxes for everybody else who is struggling to get by. Again, what kind of protections and what kind of projections are we looking at? I want to see specific numbers, not just, these off the hand, we predict and we think that this is not going to happen, because so far the record has been pretty piss poor. And I want to make sure that this does not happen again. Thank you.
We already see that happening now in areas even that don't have specific catalytic kinds of investment. And the University of Texas and the City Council, they've just come out with a study that's been procured by the Neighborhood Housing and Community Development, doing a call to action that
This is
addition
UT
to
Austin, the
this-
same folks who did the Black Lands programs, which kind of disseminated the entire black community. Okay, good.
One of the things that I would want to offer, because I think your questions are, they're complicated. And we are one of several departments under the economic affordability outcome area. I would value, if it is appropriate, to have our partners with neighborhood housing and community development working on the housing blueprint come with us potentially for a mutual presentation to talk about how we're working together, both economic development as well as the neighborhood housing and community development, to a future meeting. I think that this is a conversation that warrants time, and we would value having that. So
Thank you. Yeah,
I
because they're
offer that to
very,
the
very,
chairs.
very complicated questions like you just said, and usually we get some very simple answers which never pan out.
Understood.
So that's identified as a future agenda item. Commissioner Barnes?
I just wanted to, and I don't know how this maybe backs up what Commissioner Garza was saying, but listed on here, encouraging real estate transactions, under number 3, it says specific geographic areas that are of strategic importance. And I don't know if maybe my ADHD was firing, but is there some place where that is listed, or what areas you are targeting, so that, again, we know, or that we see what is of significant strategic importance? Because I think, too, one of the things is it's not always necessarily build it and they will come. I think with arts organizations, you do have to look at where are things being placed, and are people willing to travel X number of miles to get there? Is it convenient? Is it the facilities that need to be used by these organizations? So I just wondered if that was just something that, again, I know that's community input and those types of things, but are there areas where we can see what are these strategic important geographic areas?
I think there's three things I can answer with that. Already you have Imagine Austin Centers and Corridors. It's already a matter of council policy. The second thing that City Council, which has not done, which needs to be formed by market analysis, is, and I think the CAMP report, I mean, tip of the hat to all that analytic work that has been done of where are already these clusters of where arts organizations already exist. And I do think in terms of community input, it's very clear that we've gotten input from both musicians and artists about where they would tend to gravitate to. We have all of that. There's a third thing, too, that you will find that in other cities that have robust incentive policies that really try to get at these kind of community benefits, the market analysis that looks like, okay, so you have an Imagine Austin policy directive of having a complete community. That means these are areas where there are holes of the types of things that people want and need, like arts, like other kinds of job centers. That a neighborhood isn't a community isn't complete because it doesn't have it. People have to travel a long distance for it. The market analysis, and already that we have informed through CAMP, is going to actually be an educational tool to City Council of Is there an incentive policy that actually bases off of all this wonderful data, all the market analysis, that actually we need to incentivize or structure incentives of more robust giving in areas to become complete in order to make these objectives that we're trying to meet happen? I'm going to give you an example. The city of Fort Worth did an incentive policy a long time ago where they actually structured their incentive policy to actually be more generous in urban areas rather than suburban areas, because it would advance, they didn't call it this, but complete communities, in order to really leverage off of a number of different public policy goals. City Council of Fort Worth at that time actually adopted a whole other definition of a location, like what they defined as central city, as important. And they structured an incentive policy around that. I think we have an opportunity to do something like that, informed by the good work that the music and the arts division have already done, and be data-driven about it. I think we now need to bring in the real estate market economics in a robust way to wrap that around as well.
If I may just follow up something you just said. We've done a study that pretty much tells us exactly where artists like to cluster, and that is in the central part of the city. That is exactly where poor people of color are facing the most gentrification. And that is exactly what you're proposing. One of the things I'd like to see is have these things spread out through the other parts of the city. Tarrytown, for example, we've got a golf course there that they refuse to convert to allow housing. So, what's up with that? I don't know that. You don't know that either. Obviously, you're shaking your head. Well, again, the cluster for arts organizations is in the core of the city. District 3, District 1, all those areas, District 9, all those areas that are facing the most highest gentrification. And what you're talking about is let's bring more stuff in there. Let's displace more poor families. That's what I'm hearing. And I cannot support that.
Commissioner Reynolds?
I have a couple of questions. One following up on that is two questions are as I understand it, the majority of property taxes are state taxes, and so what can the city do to address that as this evolves? Two, is there an example of a city or a city program, not necessarily here, where you've seen economic expansion and affordability addressed in an equitable way that would be a model for such a thing? Well, let's start with those.
I'm going to continue to defer to the chairs because I know your time is important, and I do believe that we can talk a number of programs with additional partners, so I don't want to stray too much with what's on the agenda. But I think a good example in direct response to your question is the city's community land trust efforts and what they've been able to do through the Austin Housing Finance Corporation, much like the utilization of a tool like an economic development entity could assist with economic development initiatives. So to your point, there does have to be a lot of creativity around the tools that are coming out of oftentimes entities or agencies that are not government. They're government potentially initiated, and then they allow for creative avenues such as a community land trust, which is a very specific model by which the land is the title of the land is held by a governmental entity or a quasi-governmental entity, and the improvements on that land are actually what is paid taxes. So that can help with individuals who would otherwise be priced out. To the points being made with respect to gentrification. So again, we could probably kind of divert into a number of these conversations that might be more appropriate to have more of a varied conversation with what I'm thinking with just your questions and your curiosity around some of these initiatives. The Affordable Housing Blueprint is naming many of these initiatives in partnership with economic development initiatives, and so this may be just a bigger conversation that we're happy to come back with and have a little bit more diversified conversation.
Yeah. Speaking about that trust program you just presented, a few months ago when we had another Joint Commission meeting, someone was bringing that up, and one of the programs they brought up was the program in Boston, and it was the Dutney Development or Program, something like that. Now, on that program, in the core of the city of Boston, at that time, there were many, many blocks where people weren't paying their taxes, and when there was a lot of land where folks, their taxes, they were behind on their taxes, they were being having their land sold because they couldn't afford their taxes. And what happened there, specifically what you're talking about, is folks came in, put up their new buildings, and bam, just like I said, everybody around there got screwed. And their taxes went up and they were displaced. And that's specifically what you're talking about. And that is specifically the trust program that was presented last time.
Thank you, Commissioner Garza. I appreciate the fire, the passion that you're showing tonight. What I did have a question for staff was, you guys mentioned the land trust. You mentioned ASAP in passing. Was there content and update that you had in terms of ASAP specifically?
Well, one of the things that we can offer you, it might be helpful to email it and then everybody receive it since it's not posted on the agenda, is a budget update. And so the ASAP program, and I should know this off the top of my head, ASAP stands for what?
Arts-Based Assistance Program.
Yes. It did receive additional funding, and so the funding was at $400,000, and there was another $400,000 that did get moved into that program. So it's a little under $1 million that will offer I think, a wider application pool, and our Cultural Arts Division is working with our Music Division to look at program guidelines that will be more joint in its impact as well as application pool.
Thank you. At this moment, I want to, for the record, we have a new music commissioner joined us, Paul Pinone. Paul, if you could tell us what district you represent and council member.
Sorry. I'm Paul Pinone, District 6, Flanagan.
Thank you, Bob. Any further questions on this item? Yes, we have time. Commissioner Reynolds?
So on the location-based and the incentive payments, the gap payments, what kind of scale are we talking about? I'm just curious if we have a sense of how much of this large problem this is attempting to address and has the resources to address.
So in terms of what the gap is, just to clearly define that, in terms of the amount of rent a tenant needs to pay in order for the owner or the owner of a real estate project to basically break even is higher because of land costs in this city than what we would ever define as affordable for our artists. So what we are trying to do is look at the project as a whole, looking at all different kinds of revenue sources and cost sources, come up with what the true delta is to achieve that kind of rent that we would define as affordable for artists, and find different kinds of tools through whatever statute is available, not just 380, but even more so, in order to see that gap get closed. So to respond to that question, there are projects that are bigger in scale that will actually bring more revenue to the city in terms of sales tax revenue or property tax revenue or business personal property tax revenue. that will be available, that a project might not merit the whole thing or much of anything at all. It only takes a portion of that, but there are other projects like, say, a creative hub for artists for really long-term affordability. Those projects, even though they might not result in the kind of sales tax or property tax revenue, they're still incredibly important. There is still a gap that needs to be filled, and there's still ways that we as a city can help fill that gap. So you're going to have all sizes and all magnitudes. But it's really important that what is driving that analysis is what are the community benefits that the city is getting. And council has heard loud and clear through different council resolutions, the omnibus, all of the work of the Arts and Music Commission, is that long-term affordable space is what is important. And I think what's going to drive that is how do we define what is affordable for arts and music venues. That's going to drive what the delta is that we need to fill and how we're going to fill it. I'm not answering your question, but I think it's very important that we look and we define is it $10 a square foot? That's really high for some art organizations. Or what is it and what's that gap going to mean? So I don't have that number. There isn't a number because I think it's going to range. What's going to be important is that the level of the city's participation in that kind of project has to result in what is the community benefit, and it has to recognize the market context of where these transactions are happening.
Which is the basis and the importance of the market analysis being the first step.
Commissioner Rock.
Can you hear me? Okay. You have heard our concern, and you know the mistakes have been made, and you know we have seen the result of gentrification and displacement of the African American community. So I'm just caution the staff about the process. So in your discussion, so often, people think that that is good for the community, didn't get the community input. So the community hear about it, it's already after the fact. And that's why we have all these mistakes and all this frustration, and it's not an accident. So I'm hoping that there won't be another accident. So be mindful about the process and make sure that it's inclusive. And take your time. This is, a lot of money we're talking about. So, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Flores,
Just
quick.
to piggyback on Amy's comment, it would just say, what might benefit, in an attempt to help certain communities with affordability and issues, obviously make sure it doesn't create problems for other communities that are already there and existing. And I was also curious if there's some way, if there's a mechanism either by state law to create a particular kind of a zone that would help protect the tax rates of those residents who are in these areas that are being pegged for economic development, so that there is some protections that are built in for those residents when you do place something that's of added value to the community, but yet doesn't threaten the existence of the community that's already in place. So, curious. I don't know. Is there enterprise zones or something that an area could be, designated or deemed to do that? And I would, encourage looking into that as much as possible.
We will be continuing this discussion in the coming months, so thank you very much.
Oh, no, I was just saying, just kind of piggybacking on what Lulu's saying, I mean, the idea of a cap on property taxes, which is something that doesn't really happen very often in Austin, but happens other places, Southern California, so existing homeowners have a property cap in certain, if you're of a certain age or in a certain area. That would be a great idea to help offset existing homeowners. Now, when you buy a new home in an area, you don't get that tax benefit. But yeah, that would be a great idea.
I think it's important that we have this on our legislative agenda with folks who really understand Texas, the weirdness of Texas law and our Texas Constitution related to the equitability of taxing all equally benefited property owners. We'll definitely need to be very creative here in balancing the needs that we've heard from the community, the arts community, small business community, and actually our African American low-income communities who really do want affordable grocery stores in areas that are in food deserts. It's the very low-income communities that actually seek also to have this type of location-based 3ADA program to make their communities whole and balance that with the already existing gentrification issue that is already happening. So it's complicated, and we look forward to working with this commission on it in the future.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sullivan?
One comment is that, you mentioned the gap between what artists will say can afford versus what can be charged, what the gap between that versus what people can make a profit off of. And it really does appear that the city's role, if it can take this role, is to either, own the property and lease it back or give tax breaks to the owners. And then to resolve the solution of gentrification as things develop, keeping tax breaks for low-income housing to keep it together. Now, my concern is that opens up a whole new source of, expense for the city that I would worry would take away from the funding for the arts that we see today. I think it would be wonderful. I'd support it tremendously, but it is actually opening up a whole new set of expenses that if the city were committed, they could go for it, and I think it would be a wonderful solution. Hot tax, yeah.
Good.
All right, we'll conclude this item if we're good. And thank you, Economic Development staff, and we'll be seeing more of you. And next, we have item 3B, update on proposed 2018 bond package. We have our bond staff here to present. Hello. Thank you. Welcome.
Hello? Yes? Good evening. My name is Katie Zmesnik. I'm with the Office of the CFO with the City of Austin. I'm here to kind of give an overview about the 2018 bond. I make up one half of a team that has been working on the bond development process for about 2 years. She is at another meeting at a town hall, so I'm going at it this alone today. I do want to say that we are now, as city staff, in the part of the bond program where we are no longer we have to be very careful about the way we say things. So unfortunately, I'm going to be reading most of my presentation, which is not our typical. So I do apologize in advance for that, but that is unfortunately where we are. So if there's any questions at the end of this presentation, certainly I am available to answer questions. And then there on our austintexas.gov/2018 bond website, there is a form also to get some more information as well. On August 9th, the Austin City Council passed an ordinance calling for a $925 million bond election, and they set the ballot language for 7 different propositions listed here, A through G. The election will take place on November 6, 2018. Austin residents will vote on each proposition. It's important to note that it is not an all or nothing election. Each proposition is independent of the others, so you will be able to cast 7 different votes on the bonds. The propositions encompass affordable housing, libraries, museums, and cultural arts facilities, parks and recreation, flood mitigation, open space and water quality protection, health and human services, public safety, and transportation infrastructure. So how did we get here? A ton of hard work, lots of feedback from the community, and a citizen-led bond election advisory task force, which I'll refer to as the BDIF. that was appointed by the mayor and city council to identify and study the various projects for consideration. The task force convened over 79 times between the full task force and their working groups and heard from hundreds of Austinites over the course of 18 months to develop these recommendations. They ultimately developed an $850 million proposal for the city council that focused on reinvestment in, that focused on reinvestment in current city infrastructure, and they presented that recommendation to city council in April of 2018. So these are the 7 propositions that the City Council voted on August 9th of 2018. This first proposition, Proposition A, is affordable housing. The proposition amounts to $250 million, and if approved, would go toward the creation, rehabilitation, and retention of affordable home rental and ownership opportunities. The projects listed under this proposition include land acquisition, rental housing development assistance projects, acquisition and development home ownership program, and the home repair program. Proposition B, which I think most folks in this room are concerned with tonight, is the libraries, museums, and cultural arts facilities. The total amount of this proposition is $128 million, and if approved, would go towards renovations at various branch libraries and cultural centers, including our creative spaces. This money would be divided into the 4 parts shown on this slide here: cultural center improvements, branch library renovations, creative spaces, and funding to replace the Dougherty Arts Center. Proposition C is Parks and Recreation. The total amount of this proposition is $149 million, and if approved, would go toward improvements, renovations, and upgrades to various parks and recreation assets, including aquatics, playscapes, park buildings, and the acquisition of new parkland. This proposition contains 5 segments: parkland acquisition, aquatics, parkland improvements, building renovations, and infrastructure. Proposition D covers flood mitigation, open space, and water quality protection. The total amount of this proposition is $184 million and contains 2 parts: drainage and stormwater projects and the acquisition of water quality protection land. Proposition E is Health and Human Services. The total amount of this proposition is $16 million, and if approved, would go towards the design, construction, and equipping of a new neighborhood public health and human services facilities in the Dove Springs area. This facility would include a full neighborhood services center, women, infant, and children's office, an immunization clinic, and a child care center, if approved. Proposition F is in regards to public safety. The total amount of this proposition is $38 million, and if approved, would go toward renovations of existing public facilities in the city, including fire station renovations and emergency medical services renovations. And you can see the breakdown here. EMS station is 25 and fire station is 13. And last, but certainly not least, is transportation infrastructure, Proposition G. The total amount of this proposition is $160 million, and if approved, would go towards addressing deficiencies in the city's existing transportation infrastructure, including the reconstruction of streets and sidewalks, repair or replacements of bridges and structures, upgrades to traffic signals and technology, pedestrian safety improvements, and major intersection safety projects. One question that we've gotten throughout the entirety of the process is how this compares to the 2016 mobility bond, that $720 million that voters approved in November of 2016. The 2016 mobility program was intended for mobility and capacity enhancements, while the 2018 proposition is intended for renewal of existing assets due to failing conditions via rehabilitation, reconstruction, and replacement. So there is no overlap of objectives or intent between the 2016 mobility bond and the 2018 mobility bond. Or transportation proposition, I apologize. So what does this mean for the average Austin homeowner? The project expenditures in propositions A through G would, if approved, be funded by general obligation bonds, which are repaid through Austin resident property taxes. The chart up here shows you how your taxes would increase if all 7 propositions were to pass. If they all pass, the city anticipates raising the property tax by 2 cents per $100 of valuation during the life cycle of these bonds, which is anticipated to be about 6 years. It is important to note that you would not see a tax impact on your 2018 tax bill. The city would issue the bonds in 2019, so you wouldn't see that impact until your 2019 taxes, and then only incrementally as the bonds are sold. We do also have a tax rate calculator on our 2018 bond website, so you can put in the exact value of your home and see what that impact would be. So some key dates and voter information. You can register to vote from now until August 9th. You must be at least 18 years or older on or before Election Day, which is November 6th. You must be registered in the city of Austin, and you do qualify for this election if you live in Travis, Hayes, or Williamson County. In-person early voting begins October 22nd and runs until November 2nd. And if you prefer to have a mail-in ballot, you must apply by the October 26th deadline. Voter registration forms can be found online, depending on which county you live in, and you can see some of the links that are up here as well. The November 6th election is not just for these bond initiatives, but also includes federal, state, and county elections, such as Austin City Council member elections, 2 proposed amendments to the city charter, and 2 proposed citizen-initiated city ordinances. We have scheduled a series of bond open houses within all 10 districts. The first one is actually occurring tonight, which is why my partner is not here. In District 6, we are working with Councilmember Flanagan's office and kind of giving an update, basically the same presentation as I'm giving here tonight. And you can see the rest of them. The next one will be the 27th at City Hall for District 9, and then the rest are on there. And this is all available online as well at our 2018 bond website, which is austintexas.gov/2018bond. So again, here you are. You can call 311 if you'd like some more information. We have prepared the 311 operators with some information about the bond as well. And you are more than welcome to send us an email at 2018bond@austintexas.gov. And I can tell you I personally checked that email, so I will see it. And with that, I will take any questions that you all might have.
Actually, before we open it up to questions, a couple points of order. First, will you be giving us guidance in terms of our roles as advocates for the bonds, or is that coming from EDD staff?
No, I can help with that. I am not legal staff, so I'm not the final word, but I have been instructed into what you are allowed and not allowed to do.
Okay.
So I can do that right now if that's
Yes,
what
please.
you would like. So the basic answer is that you are not allowed to use city resources and be in your official capacity as a commissioner to advocate for or against any of the bond propositions. And that includes all of them, including the 2 citizen petitions, as well as the other 2 ballot measures as well. So in your own community, when you are out as a private citizen, you are more than welcome to do it. If you are, as long as you are not using any city resources, so you're not printing pamphlets, anything like that, then you're pretty much okay.
And before we open it to commissioners, I want to make sure that please allow us, the chairs, to recognize you before you speak. Just make sure we keep things in order. And we do have a citizens communication on this item. I wanted to invite that person up, John Reedy from ACA.
I thought this was later, sorry. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. So we have been speaking with our community, and as you know, we consider our community to include arts and music. We find that a false divide. And I hope this joint meeting will take an opportunity to speak about the bond in a way that moves past the arts and music divide. I also wanted to reiterate that Councilmember Kitchen's intention when she fought for the $12 million for creative spaces was to support existing spaces. She'd asked us to compile a list of eligible spaces that would have an opportunity to purchase and be acquired by the city and then leased back to their occupants. We were also asked by several council members to consult with legal experts. We did so, including someone who formerly worked for the Attorney General's office, monitoring bond language and bond funding. That person believes the creative spaces funds can be used to preserve existing spaces. So I just wanted to put that idea out there. I know there's a lot of talk about how to use that $12 million specifically. We strongly hope the city can find a mechanism to use that $12 million to preserve existing spaces. It's going to be a lot lower barrier to entry than building a new space. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do you want to write down?
So, Commission, do you want to weigh in now? Commissioner Reynolds.
I had a question about Proposition B, as you might expect. I've heard mixed feedback about whether that money can be spent on public-private partnerships, which goes to John's point, and would serve the area of greatest need, both on the music side and on the art side. So I'm curious if we can get a more clear answer.
Certainly. So kind of, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but the direction that we've been given kind of as this was added and we moved forward through this process is that the more it looks like an economic development type of activity, which means it benefits a private sector versus the public sector, it turns it into an economic development proposition in the eyes of the Attorney General. And the way that since it was included in Proposition B, we can't do economic development type activities under this proposition. How that being said, in the past, like with Zach Scott, we have done public-private partnerships, so it would just kind of be a facts and circumstances type of situation that we would need to run each scenario through the Attorney General's office, and if they sign off on it, then it can happen.
And to John's point about existing spaces, I worry a little bit about that, meaning some of the organizations that have already lost their spaces wouldn't be eligible if that would prove to be the case. And so do you see this as being restricted to existing spaces, or could it be applied to companies that have lost their space and are looking to find new homes, et cetera?
I think there's still flexibility in it, but again, it would be something that on a case-by-case basis we would need to run by the Attorney General's office once the bonds are approved.
Thank you.
If the bonds are approved, I apologize.
Are there mechanisms in place to figure out how that money would be spent, like in the bond, or are they somewhere, or will that be, if the bond passes, then those will be created?
So we've been working with the economic development staff, and it's a dynamic process that we are continuing to, as we get more information, as we kind of understand what the Attorney General's office will allow and what we're seeing and the feedback that we're getting from the community. But certainly, if and when the bonds are passed, we would be working with the community to figure out what that looks like within the allowable legal parameters by the Attorney General's office.
Commissioner Reeves.
So who ultimately decides how the $12 million for creative spaces gets spent?
Economic development staff would be the lead on it. Council would probably be the one that ultimately makes the final recommendation, depending on what the process looks like with them as well. But that is sort of from the 50,000 foot level what that would look like.
Okay. And do you have a timeline on if the bond passes?
We can get moving pretty quickly. We're in the middle of trying to sequence the 925, if they all pass, and what that looks like in terms of shovel-ready projects and how quickly we can deploy the capital within kind of the financing models that we have. So there's potential that it could be quickly. It might be a little bit. It might be a year delayed. It just sort of where it all fits in and how ready it is to be deployed.
Commissioner Rosenthal, you had your.
I just wanted to let the Joint Commissions know that I've been working on a recommendation that we can make to the council about how the decision for the $12 million gets spent, that I intend to bring up at the, it's further down in the agenda in section, in the new business section. But the point of it being that this decision of how the $12 million gets spent in the interests of transparency, and because we are the representatives of the elected council members, I don't think there's anyone in the city who's better qualified to decide how that money gets spent than this group of people right here, the Arts and Music Commissioners. Any disagreement from this group?
Besides the town halls, what's the what's the plan for getting the word out about the bond before the election?
Certainly. So, as I said, we have our 2018 bond website. On there, as well as we have a presentation request form. So if you are a member of any groups, your neighborhood groups, any other commissions, that kind of thing, I would recommend it's on the right side of the website, right at the very top, and you can request that. We've partnered with a consulting firm to kind of help us get that word out. The town halls are a big thing. We've got bond brochure booklets, which I unfortunately don't have with me today. They got taken to the other site. They are available online, but there's also a materials request form. So if you, again, have other groups that are interested, or if you yourself are just interested, you can fill that out and we can get you some booklets. We've got some one-pagers that are translated in English and 6 other languages as well. So that's kind of when we've got some social media posts that are going to go out with Nextdoor and that kind of thing. And that is because we are getting very close. We've only got about a month left. That's sort of the big push. We've certainly let all of the council members know. We've met with the majority of them one-on-one to offer up any staff time that they might need to get the word out in their districts as well.
So we can't go out there and tell people they should vote for the bond, but can the city, is there any kind of can you go on TV and tell people they should do it?
No, we as city staff are only allowed to provide factual information. You as a commission are allowed to pass a resolution that is in support. It's when you start talking about needs and persuasive words that it becomes a problem in the eyes of the Attorney General in terms of advocacy. And so you can say that, with factual information and you have a gap that you're trying to fill, and that's why you are supporting this bond if that's what you choose to do. But no, city staff is not allowed to go out and say you should vote for this. But yes.
I would add, Music Commissioner Elizabeth McQueen cannot go out there and tell your neighbor, by decree of the Music Commission, you should vote on this. But you, Elizabeth McQueen, individual citizen of Austin, can say, hey, neighbor, this is a good idea.
Correct.
For the Arts Commission, the music industry has a new body called Music Moves Austin that will be its advocate arm, representing South by Southwest and C3 Presents and some of the music nonprofits, as well as all ATX and so forth. So that is one body that we will be engaging. In fact, the next official Music Commission meeting will take place at Antone's nightclub for the first time, or at any nightclub, to my knowledge, for the first time in history.
Seems appropriate.
Exactly. October the 1st, before Music Moves Austin engages some folks running for council elections. So that is a new story and a very powerful and resourceful arm of the industry, which is now approaching the $2 billion industry. Commissioner McQueen, so we do have the cavalry in that regard, and then we can engage that, as Commissioner Rosenthal said, without specifics, with council just as our advisory capacity.
Commissioner Barnes and then Flores.
So I read about that in the Austin Monitor article on September 12th about this new entity that's been formed. And is it structured as a 501c3 or is it a 501c4?
It's C4.
It's a C4, so it's an advocacy group. And then I was I'll say myself, just concerned because in that article, it looked very music heavy. A lot of the language was about this $12 million for music. And I don't know if that was just reporter interpretation or if that was language that was imparted to the reporter. But again, I would hope that we are looking at a very, again, unified way of how are those $12 million of funding going to be used to benefit the community as a whole. And I just have to say, when I read that article, I was a little kind of, that made me, kind of turn my head because it did feel like it was music getting out in front of the horse a little bit and sort of taking the reins on something that I just felt we hadn't had an opportunity to voice a joint opportunity to discuss that. So I just wanted to bring that out.
And before we go to Commissioner Flores, that is a relative point. And I'll say this carefully, this body, the Music and Arts Commissions, really will be the one entity I foresee in the near future that balances those two brothers and sisters in the creative sector, the music industry, and then the cultural arts groups are still in separate lanes. They're still siloed off, and that's why we're here tonight and appreciate your engagement and that discussion, because what occurs, the health of one obviously affects the other. In our opinion, I believe, we speak for everyone tonight here. And certainly, Music Moves Austin, we have no jurisdiction over that body. However, we are part of that community, and we'll certainly make our voices heard to the effect of we do have a relationship with all creative sector folks and finding solutions for us together. And then we have Commissioner Flores ahead.
Yeah, it was essentially the same kind of question. It's like, what is the pitch that this music, what is it called? Music Moves Austin, going to be putting forth in, I assume they're going to be pushing, Proposition B and promoting that and trying to get that passed. Is that their...
I'm not aware of their agenda at this point. Since it's so new. Again, those.
Well, you're saying here comes the cavalry, and
Well,
if the
in
whole thing
regard
is to
to
pass the bonds,
that the
then...
Music Commission cannot advocate.
I understand.
And we've never had a body protecting the music industry in the history of this commercial music industry outside of this commission from its birth, but we can advocate for it. So we do have to walk a fine line, as you know, the history that the music industry, commercial music industry and cultural arts have been pitted in the same, had to navigate together with the same amount of money. And we're talking about $12 million here. Is not something that's going to cure what ails us, but to your question, we can't speak and will never speak for Music Moves Austin. I guess going forward, I can take that certainty tonight. So we don't know really how to answer that question on what their agenda is. But it is our agenda, I suppose, when I say their agenda, it's the music industry. So the commission does speak with that united voice. And we'll see where things go.
Oh, I'm a little confused, because you're saying you speak as a united voice at the Music Commission, but then yet you're saying you're not sure what they're going to be doing. I'm sorry, can you hear? Sorry? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm saying that I would hope that, as you said, Music Commission speaks to Music Moves Austin and imparts its carefully, what the Music Commission sort of sees for this particular bond proposal.
Thank you. We have Commissioner Sullivan?
Yeah,
So actually, I'm sorry, Commissioner Sullivan, before we move on, I wanted to make sure that the minutes recognize Arts Commissioner Fonte has joined the dais, and that also if we don't have a question for staff, that maybe a commissioner would make a motion to move up item 5A1 or 5A2 so that we can,
Actually, I do have one more question for staff. I saw that the people who are eligible to vote on this bond include people in Hayes and Williamson counties. I assume only Austin City residents of those counties.
Correct.
So someone in Georgetown cannot vote for Austin's
Correct.
bond, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
any commissioner that would like to recommend
I
moving?
move that we move up to agenda item 5A, discussion and action items. Is that
Second.
It's a motion by Commissioner McQueen, sorry, to move item 5A2 on the amended agenda.
So are we finished with
Amended.
staff?
There's an amended agenda with 5A2. From the amended agenda 5A2, it says the same thing except item 4 says staff briefing for the Arts Commission, arts briefing. So again, Commissioner McQueen making the motion to move 5A2, seconded by Commissioner Pignon.
I mean, as long as everyone has no more questions for staff.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? Abstentions? We're in discussion and possible action on proposed 2018 bond package. Commissioner Sullivan.
No, I was just going to make the comment about, the fact that the money had first come up as a joint arts and music thing, and we had kind of taken this opportunity to work together to do this. And so I'm not sure, where the Music Moves Austin thing is, but we should definitely have that clear with them, that we are working with the Arts Committee or Arts Commission to be able to use that money for both communities.
Yes.
And I
Commissioner
would,
McQueen.
I would just like to remind everyone that when we're talking about Proposition B, I mean, $12 million is actually the smallest amount that we're talking about. So most of the money is going to go towards cultural center improvements and including the Dougherty Arts Center, the Dougherty Arts Center replacement and the branch library renovations. And I think it's actually an opportunity for us to express our solidarity, not just with each other, but with the greater Austin cultural community, especially since we're working on getting the Artist Access program off the ground, which really requires the commitment and the collaboration between the cultural centers. So we need to make sure, I think, that when we are in our private citizen, like talking to our friends and neighbors about why they should vote for the bond, we explain to them that, that it impacts the entire Austin cultural landscape, not just music and art. And it strengthens everyone and lifts them up.
And it does speak also to the new values that we heard earlier from economic development on equity and diversity. I reiterate what you say, underscore that what happens at the Emma Espariano's Mexican American Cultural Center and the Carver Museum, the Asian American Resource Center, Mexicardi Museum, again, reflects on the health of our music community and cultural arts, certainly. Any other? Rosenthal, Commissioner Rosenthal.
Yeah. I would like to make a proposal about a resolution that this joint body can make that kind of enshrines exactly that 50-50, or not, okay, maybe not 50-50, but joint decision-making of these two organizations. And I don't want to get caught down by 50-50 or anything like that, but that should be something that should be decided by these groups. And I have a proposal that requests from the City Council some definition of structure and enshrines the involvement of these two commissions in the allocation of bond funds that are designated for music and arts in general. Now, that would certainly apply to this upcoming bond. I don't want to get into counting our chickens before they're hatched, but I think now is the time and place for these commissions to assert our role in the allocation process. So I've written up a proposed resolution, and I'd like to share it with this group and see if it flies. Okay?
Please read it.
Okay. Whereas transparency and citizen representation are essential to every government funding process, we request City Council establish the following structure for disbursement of bond funding for art and music facilities. 1, the Arts Commission and Music Commission shall establish criteria for proposals. So we're going to put together an RFP, request for proposal process. So the criteria for the proposals would be defined by these two groups. 2, city staff shall establish an RFP process based on the criteria established by the commissions, oversee the request process and the management and coordination of the individual proposals that come in for the RFP. 3, the completed proposals shall be presented to the Music or Arts Commission or the Joint Commission, depending on whether the designation is for one or the other or both. In the case that we're talking about here, it would clearly be both. The commissions shall deliberate and reach agreement to recommend the allocation of funds to the specific proposals. The commissions, and then I think number 4, the commission's recommendations shall be presented to the City Council for final approval of the allocation of the bond funding. So basically, I'm proposing here a 4-step process. Number 1, we define what the criteria are that we're looking for. Number 2, that the city staff launches a RFP, request for proposal, where organizations can then request, they can propose the funding. Number 3, that these proposals then get evaluated by this joint group. And number 4, that we then send that on to the council.
Discussion, Chairman.
Commissioner Flores?
Sorry, is this on? Can you hear me? Yeah, I have a question regarding, more specific, because I don't remember before you got to the 4, the beginning is the funding for, I would be specific to say for the creative space, the 12 million for creative spaces, as opposed to just Proposition B as is stated. That's a way broader proposition, but I think we have to be specific as to the 12 million allocated for creative spaces should the whole proposition pass. And then also I would assume that this process would begin after we have some clarity, possibly from the Attorney General's office, regarding the types of projects that can and cannot be undertaken with this $12 million.
And
Mr. Sullivan.
my one question is with the criteria, the number 1 issue that you've spoken about, I believe it's somewhat laid out in the Economic Policy Development New Values. A lot of the criteria that the city has for what they want to see in these developments. I could be wrong, but that does appear to be our primary guide.
Commissioner McCain?
Yeah, thanks for putting that together. It's really a specific process that you're noting. I just feel like I need to mention that if I was going to be asked to approve any way to use this funding, whether that's for music and arts, that I feel like that I need to stress a language of equity and inclusion of our entire community in this, and that be the number 1 consideration that we look at before any large decisions would be made. You're talking about an RFP process, and you release this, and you give this documents, and a lot of people here don't have access to that information easily, and they're not able to even prepare an RFP or have input at that point of what their community needs. There's been a specific incident recently where an RFP was pulled that was very confusing, that went out to more of our minority communities, and so I think that actually the city's aware of that this process is missing a lot of people. So I guess I just feel like maybe we should take it up a notch and generally maybe make more recommendations of what we would like to see the city or us consider before we get down into the details of the process.
Commissioner Barnes?
I also, I agree with that, and not having had a chance to sort of digest this other than just hearing it right now in front of us, I mean, it certainly brings up a lot of questions in my mind about, how are the RFPs? I mean, I certainly, you're saying staff is going to do that. Does staff have the bandwidth now to undertake $12 million of funding RFPs without additional staff? I can't speak to their bandwidth, but then also if it's a music commission centered RFP request, does that just go to you all? If it's a more of a cultural one, does that come to us? How are we then communicating about what we're wanting to put forward as opposed to what you're wanting to put forward? We as a commission, as commissions, I guess, can only meet a certain number of times in joint session. So then for us to be able to meet in that entity, I think we're limited on. So I just think, while again, I appreciate you doing, at least laying the foundation, I would want an opportunity, and maybe it's a working group that's established from these two commissions to greater vet this proposal that you're putting forward to us so that we can really run the traps on all of the different scenarios. Because right now, I'm still trying to digest it all, and I don't feel comfortable making a decision off the fly.
Commissioner Reynolds?
So I wonder if I would propose two things. One, that we form a working group specific to the bond between the two commissions, and then we develop how we would recommend this process to happen. And then two, that we could, I think, have a resolution where we endorse the bond, as we were told by staff we could do. And I would love to see that happen tonight, so that we could put that out in the public that we're for Proposition B, and then we work on the details later through this working group.
Was that a real motion?
Motion.
I'll second that.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Reynolds of the Music Commission to form a working group consisting of members of both Arts and Music Commissions to discuss the resolution or the recommendation for council to discuss options in terms of, I've lost my train of thought.
The bond allocation process for the creative spaces, 12 million.
For creating an endorsement of the bond allocation.
So it's two things, working group and bond endorsement.
Which are two separate.
And
Do we need to do two separate motions?
I think that's two separate motions, right? So let's
So
start
first
with the
motion is
beginning.
to form the working group between music and art, and that was seconded by Commissioner Polgar.
So any further discussion on that item?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Passes. The second motion made by Commissioner Reynolds was to
Gonna
draft.
Rephrase it again.
To endorse the bond as a group is.
And it's the entire bond, and the entire cultural arts bond, not the.
Proposition B.
Proposition B, exactly.
Proposition B.
So Commissioner Reynolds made a motion to draft an endorsement of Proposition B, seconded by Commissioner Flores. Comments?
Do we need to come up with language for that now to endorse, or can we just draft a general endorsement?
Yep. Staff.
Can I ask for Katie's thoughts on whether that would stray too far into advocacy at this point?
I was just asked this question. As long as you are basing your recommendation on facts, so if you are saying that there is a factual gap between, artists or musicians, that kind of thing, and therefore, because of those facts, you are recommending approval of this bond, as I understand it, that is acceptable. If you simply say, we need it, it is urgent, you should vote for this, that is not acceptable. So as long as you keep it to the facts, and your facts are what drive your recommendation, and your recommendation is something along the lines of, we support, then it's okay. Correct. Yes. And again, I'm not a lawyer, so this could
Thank
go,
you.
it could come back, but forgiveness, permission, right?
And it might be a good idea for a commissioner to recommend a substitute motion to direct the working group to draft the language. Commissioner Fonte.
I was just going to say one of the facts that we could bring up is the number of times every single one of our meetings is opened with arts group after arts group talking about space concerns, rental concerns, and that was why we put the recommendation in the first place. And that is a very real fact that has been pushed to us every single time. So we're representing the people who have brought their concerns to us. So.
Commissioner McCain?
And I would just like to say, whoever writes the recommendation, please also recommend the need for the cultural centers for the build-outs, because that's very important to our community, and we do, as an Arts Commission, support their.
But don't say need.
Is there a substitute motion to direct the working group to draft this endorsement?
Are we directing the existing bond working group to draft an endorsement of the bond?
If that is your motion, that is what will be stated.
I move that rather than creating a new working group, we ask the existing bond working group to draft an endorsement of Proposition B, part of the 2016 bond.
I would also not call it an endorsement. It's a recommend. You are making
recommendation.
a resolution you're making a recommendation in support of
A
this.
recommendation in support of.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I'll second that.
And to clarify, this is the working group that was just formed?
What's that?
This is the working group that we just identified at this meeting?
No, wasn't there a working group that already was working on the bond?
I think so. The existing Arts, Music, and Cultural Centers working group.
Yes. Oh,
That was my point of clarification. Is it the new one that we created tonight, or the existing Arts, Music, Cultural Center working group?
I was going to say the one that already existed, but you guys feel it sounds like it's the one that we created tonight. That's fine with me. Either one.
Substitute motion by Commissioner McQueen to direct the working group that we created tonight to draft the recommendation
In support of.
in support of Proposition B. Seconded by Commissioner Flores.
Discussion on that resolution. Let's just move fast. This is not a controversial thing. Election is coming up really fast. I mean, right here, we're all in favor of it. If someone could quickly draft language, that's great. But if we're going to have this group draft something, let's not, at the minimum, we're going to have to wait weeks, and then it will be two separate resolutions. It won't have the power. I think we could come up with something real quick. Katie, you just whatever you just said, write that write that down. We know it's legal because she's a lawyer, right?
Yes.
Yeah. That was for the record. That was a joke, but like this is not controversial. Whatever she said.
Commissioner Fonte?
I agree. Our next meetings are going to be in like 3 weeks from now, and the election is shortly a week after that. It doesn't do us a whole lot of good. So I feel like we should buck her down and just make something. It doesn't have to be the strongest worded. And I think we all know what the issues are. I think we can write something.
Commissioner Reynolds?
I'm going to read something, then we can ask lawyer Katie to help us tell the later on it. So, here's proposed language. Due to the critical state of our arts, music, and cultural communities, the Music and Arts Commissions recommend the passage of the 2018 bond Proposition B.
Would it need to be more specific than that? Because we could do something like, whereas Austin's cultural centers require funding for renovation and maintenance, which is what it is, right? Like you could kind of go down the line
I think that's what Commissioner Orenthal was arguing against, or Rosenthal was arguing against.
To me, it's the simpler the better, and it's a simple headline that we are for Proposition B, and we're going to do the complicated stuff with the working group.
So the motion on the table was to substitute and direct the working group. I'll call the vote. The motion on the table was to direct the working group to draft language. It sounds like that's not what we want to do, so I'm calling the vote so we can vote that down.
Propose a substitute motion.
We're going to vote on one first.
Let's vote on this one first.
We vote this one down, right?
Thank you. All in favor of the substitute motion to direct the working group to draft language? 2-4. Any against? Abstentions? It fails to pass. So the original motion was to draft language in support of Prop B. Commissioner Fonte, did you have discussion?
No, I second that motion.
Yeah, but.
And that one was already.
Now we need to come up with the language that we're going to pass right now.
And we're going to use the language. Commissioner Reynolds, please read that again.
Due to the critical state of our arts, music, and cultural communities, the Music and Arts Commissions recommend the passage of the 2018 bond Proposition B.
Move to second.
That was already seconded. Discussion, Commissioner Flores?
I'm fine with the language, and if we pass that, I would like to make sure that, have the caveat that we run it by the appropriate staff to make sure it doesn't have any words that we're not supposed to be using, and they get, tweaked based on what legal counsel says, but, in general, I support this language, but not knowing if it's got any trap words or anything that we shouldn't be utilizing, that I would just say maybe we do that with that caveat.
Is that acceptable?
Commissioner
staff?
Polgar?
Well, I was going to ask if we remove just the word critical, which seems like it's an inflammatory word, not that it's not true, but it seems like an opinion word potentially. Would that solve the problem?
Commissioner Mott?
Can we just say that we have the spirit of this language in mind and go through the legal and, this is our recommendation, but the language is the spirit of this recommendation. So you can process it with the legal about what's best to represent our spirit here.
Commissioner Reynolds?
My concern with waiting is, as we discussed earlier, that our recommendation will be irrelevant by the time we get it. I'd rather, if we get feedback that it was not legal, then we'll get rid of it.
Commissioner Polgar?
And I'm in agreement that I don't want to put staff in a position that they have to parse that, especially if there are restrictions on how they can talk about it. I would rather just put a straightforward recommendation forward that says that we as a joint commission support Proposition B. Yeah, so change the word critical to current, and we're probably good.
Commissioner Barnes?
So I guess maybe I'm confused, and again, I typically am the slowest person in the room, so I'm just going to apologize for that. But what is this resolution for? Really, it's now going before the voters to decide if this will be something that passes. So telling City Council that we endorse it, to me, seems superfluous. I mean, if we're telling the community that this is something that we have endorsed, I don't know if that oversteps our bounds. But if it's on record, I guess that certainly is important. But really, the vote now is in the hands of the community. It's not something that City Council even decides.
Correct. City Council has already decided.
Right, they've already decided this. So I'm not really sure what all of the endorsement is meant to do, other than show the community we support this, which we do.
We're not endorsing it, we're recommending.
Right, we're recommending it, sorry.
Commissioner Polgar?
So to your point, Commissioner Barnes, my thought on this goes back to the earlier conversation we were having around this table about the combined efforts of arts and music with respect to the 12 million, and that us together putting forward a supporting statement on the bond as a package reinforces that collaboration.
Commissioner Flores?
I kind of agree with Commissioner Barnes in the sense that we put forth these recommendations for the bond, and I think we are on record in previous resolutions to council that we support the cultural arts facilities bond as well as the $12 million. Well, we ended up with $12 million, so I think we're on record that we've already, that we recommend the passage of the 12 million for the creative spaces, as well as the, I guess we're not on record for library, so maybe we need to add that.
Mr. Reynolds, I'm sorry, Reynolds?
As I remember it, we're on record for about 40 some odd million dollars in recommendation. Then this went through the council, came back with 12 million, and is packaged with the cultural centers and other things that we would be additionally endorsing. So I think we're clarifying that we're both okay with where this ended up at the 12 million, and that we are for the entire Proposition B and not just our own creative spaces.
I have a question for staff. I would imagine that you've been in front of a number of commissions talking about this bond. So I was just wondering what other commissions have done and what the language, if they recommended any part of the bond, what their language looked like.
No other commissions that we've spoken to since the passage of the bond have done a recommendation.
Oh, interesting.
Commissioner Garza.
After having spoken and kind of following on Mr. Barnes' statements, and I spoke with my city council member about this, and his take is that this entire bond thing, different, we got what, all the way to G, X, Y, Z, I'm not sure how far we go, but has been really confused by a lot of folks and has been muddied and whatnot. And his directions to me were to just stay out of it for now. Let those city council members who are not up for re-election focus on that. And basically, that's where I'm going to stay. I'm not going to support anything having to do with the bonds at this point.
Mr. Flores?
I just want to I'd like to interject that it's 8:23 and we are still in need of doing some business on arts, cultural arts funding, and so I would hope that we could wrap this up.
I'd like to call the vote. The motion was to make the recommendation to council as described by Commissioner Reynolds, seconded by Flores.
Before we vote, we'll have it reread one more time.
Due to the current state of our arts, music, and cultural communities, the Music and Arts Commission recommend the passage of the 2018 bond Proposition B.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Garza, any abstentions? Passes. Thank you. Quick.
Yes.
Just before you leave, do you have a timeline for when the Attorney General might rule on when you can, how we can use these funds?
I don't at this point, but I will certainly, as I take your resolution back to our legal team, I will ask them kind of any timeline that they might know and try and get an update for that and get back to you.
So I just want to take a 2-minute break, allow Music Commission to adjourn their portion of the meeting. And as y'all exit, 2-minute break, and then the Arts Commission will continue with our agenda item of 4A.
I have a question. Who's going to be on this joint commission that we just created?
I would volunteer.
Show of hands.
Volunteers, raise your hand high.
And call your name out, please, for the record. Start with Rosenthal.
Commissioner Rosenthal, Commissioner Reeves, Commissioner Barnes, Commissioner Sullivan, Commissioner Flores. That's our working group. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I will ask if we have a motion to adjourn of the Music Commission.
Motion to adjourn.
And we have a
Music
second.
Commission.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The Music Commission portion of this joint meeting is adjourned.
2-minute break for the Arts Commission meeting.
2018, we had 331 core and CHF Cultural Heritage Festival applications. So again, around 100 more applications received this year. Additionally, in FY18, we had received 150 community initiatives and 90 capacity building applications. So we are expecting we'll probably have over 600 applications in total for FY19, as again, since those are monthly applications, we have not received them yet. Of the 421 applications recommended for funding. So we received 427, 421 were recommended for funding. Of those, 125 were first-time applicants. And so what we mean by first-time applicants is that they had not received cultural funding at least twice in the past 5 years. And so a reminder that those are what we call new applicants, and they are limited to a $10,000 maximum request amount in their first 2 years of funding from the city. As part of the ongoing effort to report the ethnic demographics of all applicants, we received a total of 133 applications from Alana applicants. In FY18, we only had 86 Alana applications in both core and cultural heritage festivals. So a substantial increase. And just a reminder that Alana stands for African American, Latin American, Asian American, Arab American, and Native American. Okay, so what are the FY19 funding matrix parameters? There's various levers that the funding working group considers when coming up with a plan for the distribution of funds. I will go into them in more detail, but just kind of want to, in later slides, but just want to list them here first. Scores listed, that's the only one the cultural funding working group does not have any sway over. That is determined by the peer panel, again, using the Olympic scoring method. All the rest of the 7 are levers that the Arts Commission Funding Working Group can affect and that you as a body can vote on as a whole. So the award ceiling is one of those. Again, I'll go into more detail in a bit. The percent of budget is one. The per point deduction is another lever. There's a minimum award amount we have established. There's the equity modifiers we've instituted in the past few years, and there's a limit in cuts that we added new this year to 11% across the board, which I'll go into more detail later. And so that 11%, just to give a little bit, that's for both the core and cultural heritage festivals. Some of these levers apply only in core, some of them, or all of them apply in core, some of them also apply in cultural heritage festivals. So the ones that will apply in both cultural heritage festivals and the culturally specific marketing supplement are the score, the award ceiling, the per point deduction, and the limitation of any cuts to no more than 11%. So a different funding matrix is done for the core funding programs, as I alluded to earlier, than for the culturally specific marketing supplement and the cultural heritage festivals. The culturally specific marketing supplement provides funds for marketing and audience development for Alana, LGBTQIA, and differently abled applicants. To receive the supplement, applicants needed to score 7 or higher on their 10-point marketing score. So that's kind of where the score lever comes in. 124 recipients received a total of $350,941 in culturally specific marketing supplement funds. As a supplement, these funds are on top of their core or their cultural heritage festival award amount. You can also see that for organizations over $100,000, they could request up to $10,000, but the max award was only $7,500. So again, the max ceiling, that's one of those levers being pulled. For those organizations over $100,000, you can see there was a $2,000 per point deduction. So basically for each point that their score was below the high score of 10, they received $2,000 less in funding for a minimum award of $1,500. And as a reminder, there is no matching requirement for the culturally specific marketing supplement. And then for organizations under $100,000 or for individual artists, while they could request $5,000, the maximum they received was $3,750 if they scored a perfect 10 on their marketing score. The Cultural Heritage Festivals program provides funding to nonprofits, unincorporated groups, or individuals to produce or present festivals honoring a particular ethnic cultural heritage and its various artistic forms of expression. The funding working group recommends using an 8% per point deduction to determine the award amount for cultural heritage applicants. This is a change from previous years. It had been at a 3% per point deduction since the initiation of this program. And the reason we use percent per point deduction instead of a straight dollar figure is because the request amounts in this program ranged from a low this year, FY19, of $5,000 up to a high of $100,000. So using a straight dollar figure, something that would not negatively affect the $5,000 request amount would not put a dent in the $100,000 request, and something that would affect the $100,000 request would decimate the $5,000. So instead, we use a percent of their request amount. So it had been 3% throughout the years. It's 8% this year. Additionally, a maximum award amount of $90,000 was recommended by the Cultural Funding Working Group. So even though they could request up to $100,000, the maximum award was $90,000. And so that led to a total allocation of $445,580 being recommended for the Cultural Heritage Festivals program. And I believe in the slide earlier it showed there, I believe it was 19 applicants in this program, or 19 contractors. So those were the parameters for culturally specific marketing supplement and cultural heritage festivals. Now I'll move on to core. Just as in cultural heritage festivals, you must score at least a 75 on a 100-point scale in order to receive funding. The higher an applicant scores, the larger their award can potentially be, but it cannot be higher than the award ceiling. So what does the decreased award ceiling look like for core? So, as I mentioned earlier, organizations can be categorized by budget size, and so it's basically organizational support, $1 million and over, or under $1 million, and then all the other project support programs basically being divided by budget amounts of $50,000. In increments of $50,000. And this is basically so like-sized organizations are being compared against other similar-sized organizations, because a larger organization with more resources may have grant writers and fundraising staff on board, while a smaller volunteer group would not. So what we did was we basically decreased the the maximum award ceiling 10% from what had been approved in the FY18 funding matrix. So that means the highest score, was basically 10% this year than opposed to what it was last year, FY18. We also decreased the percent of budget allowed. So, as I mentioned earlier, the award can be no more than a certain percentage of a 2-year operating budget. And so we basically decreased it 2% across the board for project support 1 and higher, and 5% for everybody else. And when I say we, it's the funding working group, and staff runs scenarios based on input from the funding working group, which I'll show a little bit in a slide later. We also increased the per point deduction in the core funding program. So what did that look like for here? For each point, again, that an applicant scores below the highest score in their respective budget categorization, a certain dollar amount is deducted. This was increased basically across the board for everybody. Again, there's different levers that can be pulled, since we were close to the same amount of money but had about 100 or so successful new applicants. This per point deduction was increased so that score counted a little bit more. And then the final funding matrix parameters, we maintained the minimum award of $4,000. So when we say a minimum award of $4,000, you still need to score a 75 or more in order to receive funding. But anybody who scored at least a 75 will get $4,000, regardless of what their percent of budget says, regardless of the per point deduction, they'll get at least $4,000. We maintain the 10% equity modifiers. There's two kind of equity modifiers. I talked about the culturally specific marketing supplement earlier. We also had what we call the 10% Alana modifier, which is only for core. And what it does, since core awards are based in part on the percent of budget, and Alana groups are traditionally funded by members of their specific communities and unfortunately have less disposable income, we added a 10% modifier to their budget, so that way the percent of budget decrease would not necessarily hit them as much. Now, with that being said, the Alana modifier will not give them more than what their score says they should get. So score is still the ultimate. And we had, I should have run the numbers. I didn't get a chance to do that. I think we had around $500,000, $300,000 affected by the Alana modifier. Do you know, Anne Marie? I don't know. It's roughly what it was last year, so I would assume it's probably something similar this year. So again, people may be eligible, or applicants may be eligible for it, but they will not receive it if their scores, if it results in an award higher than what their score says they should receive. And then finally, we limited cuts to 11% across the board in both core and cultural heritage festivals. This was based on their FY18 core or cultural heritage festivals award amount, not counting their culturally specific marketing supplement. So if somebody was receiving a 30, 40, 50% cut, they are being limited to no more than an 11% cut. If they were receiving a 5% cut, they're still, receiving a 5% cut. We're not making them get an 11% cut. And so how did all of that kind of shake out? So every year, as I mentioned earlier, we run various scenarios, so we get feedback, staff gets feedback from the funding working group, and we run different scenarios to see how we're going to award the funds out. We always use the previous year's matrix as a baseline, so you can see on your page there that down at the bottom we had $12.5 million even to give out. So scenario one is always using the exact same parameters of the year before. So using the exact same parameters from the matrix as last year, it actually comes out to $13.9 million or $2.6 million over budget. So we ran various different scenarios and came up with what was the initial recommendation that the funding working group voted on in July. And we had about $11.4 million to give out. Again, we found cuts in other places, which I'll go through a bit here in the lines, and the 5% revenue, actuals that came in higher than the previously estimated amounts to get us up to $12.47 million. So you can see in organizational support in FY18 received $3.6 million for all applicants. Now it's going up to $3.7 million. Project Support 1 did go down slightly from $3.9 million to 3.8. Project Support 2 went from 1.6 to 1.9, almost $2 million. Project Support 3 went from 1.5 to $1.6 million. Culturally specific marketing supplement was slightly down from $391,000 to $350,000. Cultural heritage festivals went from $355,000 to $445,000. We did cut community initiatives. That was one of the places that we made cuts in order to help limit the cuts to the core and cultural heritage festivals applicants to no more than 11%. And so we had $625,000 budgeted for community initiatives. We spent just over $500,000 in FY18, and so now we're bringing community initiatives down to $30,000. Tempo decreased from $250,000 to $150,700. And then the tourism and promotion on the bottom line in the blue had been $250,000. There was some money that had not been spent in FY18 that we rolled over. There was some money from FY19 that has already been accounted for and cannot be spent. But the amount that we could spend, we put back into the cultural funding pot to come up with that $12.4 million figure. And so that's only $78,000. And so those are the funding parameters and the award amounts for the various funding programs, Commission. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them. Yes.
Actually,
I'll leave it to the chair.
we got to do citizen communication first. I wanted to do citizens communication before we open up the floor to questions. We do have some breathing room. We do have to be out of here at 10 o'clock instead of 9. But considering that I help put the chairs out, I assume I'm going to help put the chairs up. So I would still like to limit your time to 2 minutes as opposed to 3 minutes. And so with that, I would like to call up the first person, Sharon Marroquin from Ballet East. Barna Cantor, you're up next.
Hi, good evening. My name is Sharon Marroquin. Thanks. And I am here on behalf of Ballet East. I am an independent choreographer and dancer and have worked with ballets for over 15 years. A couple of days ago, he talked to you a little bit about his outreach program and the impact that it has. And I'm here just to ask you to not forget the other part of Ballet East, which is to support both emerging and established artists here in Austin, so that you know that the funds that he receives have a ripple effect within the dance community. There's a plethora of dance artists in this town that have been supported and have been able to hone their craft, like I have, thanks to Rodolfo Mendez and Ballet East. Thank you.
Thank you. Barna Cantor from Data Geek. Samuel Yamthi is next.
I thought. Hi, my name is Barna Cantor. I'm from Data Geek. I thought that today we're going to talk a little bit about how the funding matrix is actually formulated, or how to open up community input into how to formulate the funding matrix. The reason I'm here is because of one point of the funding matrix, which is the scoring system. I think a week ago, several organizations expressed their dissatisfaction with the way the panel was prepared and the arbitrary nature of the scoring itself. And I think community input is needed to make the scoring system more accurate. And I think one way to make it more accurate is actually along the lines of the recommendations of the Economic Development Department, which is how we guard this money, what kind of stewards we are as an organization of the money that we actually receive from the city. So I think one area that would be more specific and more accountable and more, how can I say, number-based in the scoring system. And actually it makes the scoring more important is maybe a breaking down of the programs of each organization. So we are not just talking about in overall budgets and overall in-kinds and overall operation expenses, but actual program budgets. I remember that. So more like an income-expense ratio of specific projects that the organizations are providing to the community would be, I think, a place to start to make. We all have tax forms that we are filing with the IRS. I mean, there's a track record.
Barna, thank you. We have other people that want to speak as well. We are limited on time tonight, unfortunately. And you can always reach out to both staff and commission and give us more recommendations. Thank you very much. Samuel Yamthi from AFT VS. Jennifer Chenoweth with Fistera Projects is next.
Good afternoon for everybody. I really didn't want to say anything today. I put my name there just in case. But I'm going to start by telling you how impressed I am about the process. I really like it. There's something that I have to say because I don't know if you all know it. I know you all know it because they have a lot of black artists in this town. I'm a journalist, community journalist, and I would really appreciate it. I don't know how they do it. If there was a black person here advocating for me, because I'm from Africa. I represent Africa here in Austin. We have at least 26,000 people based on the statistics that I had. We have a lot of artists. We have a lot of need for facility, like any other group here. The difference is that our community, they know are there. They don't come to these places. So I don't want to be long because I know we don't have time. But I don't know how they do it. But next time, if you all can find a way for somebody like that to, represent us, that will be really a good thing. That's the only thing that I want to say tonight. And again, I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here tonight. And hopefully, I will come some more.
Thank you. I hope to see you again. And we are working on that. Get some better representation on the commission. Jennifer Chenoweth, Vistara Projects, followed by Ethan Azarian.
Good evening, and thank you for your hard work. I actually enjoyed reading your annual report because it just showed how much time you've all spent working on all the things that I tried to help with a few years ago, and I really appreciate your hard work and many long hours toward the betterment of the community. I'm going to talk big picture instead of little stuff, because y'all are already deep in the weeds of the little stuff, and all the other organizations will here to speak to that. But Austin's mission is to be the most livable city, and we've been trying to figure out how to keep the arts and music and culture as essential to that quality of life in Austin, and we've been all feeling the pain of the exodus and the closings and the failures, and I'm feeling it personally myself a lot. Our paid staff at the city has a really hard job of facilitating all of us very moody artists in creating our work for the public, for the betterment of Austin, and I really appreciate your hard work. But we all know that once you lose trust in a system, it's really hard to get it back. It's not a conversation that happens once. It's not a whoops, I made a mistake, even if you ever do hear that. And I founded 2 nonprofit arts organizations and fell in every loophole and pothole that there could possibly be that really literally kept me from feeding my family as well as I should have, and money off the table at every opportunity. And I've had a great loss of faith in the system. And I would really like to have us keep looking at who's accountable to whom and where is the money going. And often in the details that we're looking at, we're losing picture that the Arts Commission looks at primarily the hot funds and AIPP, but I'd like you to remember that we have a great amount of power and responsibility, and to look at the whole picture of who's accountable to whom and where all of the budget and money is going. I appreciate the detail in this, but there's a bigger budget to look at and how we have a voice in that distribution. Thank you.
Thank you. Ethan Azarian, Blue Cow Studio, followed by Sylvia Roscoe.
Check, hello. Thank you for being here. My
My name is Ethan Nazarian. I'm an artist and musician. I've been in Austin for 30 years. I work out of the Blue Cow Studio, which is about a quarter mile from here on the east side. And I wanted to take this opportunity to kind of bear witness to this whole process for myself, but also to give testimony to how important the Cultural Arts Funding Program has been for me and other artists I know. I've been receiving funding from the city, starting with community initiatives funding since 2016, and in 2017 and 18 I've received core funding. This has allowed me to work with elementary, middle, and high school age students, and together we have designed and painted murals for their schools. These murals tend to be on exterior walls and are accessible and very visible to the public. Without funding from the Cultural Art Program, these projects would not have been possible. Schools don't tend to have extra money. So when I approach them and say, hey, can I paint on your wall? They're like, well, yeah, sounds great, but we don't have any money. So thank you to the city of Austin for making that money available. As it stands now, this year's funding for Blue Cow Studio has been cut by 38% from last year's award amount. And I've been in contact with my peers as well, who've also had cuts to their budgets this year. And we all complain about the inconsistency of the peer panel review, or I do anyway, or the process, the review process, or the financial concerns that we're discussing here tonight, which seemed to come out of the blue not too long ago. Anyway, I'm optimistic that you guys will figure this out. And thank you for this opportunity to talk. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good night.
Silvio Orozco from Mexicarte Museum, followed by Michael Torres.
Good evening. I'm Sylvia Orozco. I'm the Executive Director of Mexicarte Museum, and I'm going to read from the letter that I sent to the Arts Commission and to some of you today, and here's a copy being passed out. We are requesting that Mexicarte's museum's funding be restored to the funding from fiscal year 18, and for you to review the current Arts Commission's recommendations through the city's equity lens and the Austin Strategic Direction 2023. Taken from the City of Austin's history of the Equity Office, throughout history, communities of color have been excluded, marginalized, discriminated against as a result of city's policies and practices. This history includes a lack of funding for cultural arts organizations of color and cultural arts services for communities of color, and this has been for decades. Although the direct intention of the funding reduction is not specifically to marginalize Mexicarte Museum and other organizations of color and services for our communities, the result is in the process. The Arts Commission and the City of Austin must consider equity in the arts funding and the impact to our organizations. The proposed cut will take Mexicarte's museum funding back 10 years. By reducing our funding, the City of Austin is reducing equity in services in Austin. The funding recommendation will impact our funding and affect us for many years. It becomes a starting point for future funding and for comparison. Therefore, it will influence our recommendations in the future. The funding represents more than 1/4 of last year's funding. Our staff salaries are very modest. A $47,700 reduction for Mexicarte means 1 staff and 1/3 salary cuts. Please restore our funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Torres, Mexicarte Museum, followed by Sally Jacques.
Thank you for having us here tonight, and thank you for your service. My name is Michael Torres. I'm the president of the Mexicarte Museum Board, and I used to be here at Arthur Andersen, PricewaterhouseCoopers, so very familiar with the budgeting process. I know it's not an easy process, so thank you for everything you're doing. The Matrix, I took the blue pill tonight. And with that, I want to talk about equity and sustainability and how they're related together as it relates to our needs. $47,000 cut on $1 million budget, it's about 5%. There's another organization, I will not name names, at about a $9 million budget, so it's about 0.5%. So the methodology that's applied, I think, is very relevant, and I think the work that was done to put the matrix together in 2005 was very sound. But as we look at the fundamental approach of how it's approached, there's actually an inequity that's created. For us, it means a 1.3 reduction in heads out of 7. For another organization, it's 1.3 heads out of 60. When you compare that, and you really look at the history of community, the communities of color, a lot of the budgets are already low to begin with. So when you take just a kind of a peanut butter spread approach, as opposed to an operating budget approach, sometimes it'll cut to the bone in one organization, and it'll just be on the skin of another. And so I ask you to look at that and to consider that as you look at the matrix, and also as you look at it in light of the Austin Strategic Direction 2023 and the Austin Equity Lens. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sally Jacques, Blue Lapis Light, followed by Jamie Bancroft.
Hello, I am Sally Jacques. I'm the Artistic Director and founder of Blue Lapis Light Site-Specific Aerial Dance. And I have lived in this city for 30 years and been witness to many of the old cultural funding conflicts. And a few years ago, this whole system, when it was revamped, has worked very well. And it's been shocking to me to see organizations of longevity in this community who had such dramatic cuts. And for us, although we have a studio, we're fortunate to, we built a studio and we dance around town on buildings, it's a salary when you cut someone's funding that much. And in smaller organizations, we are all doing 4 or 5 jobs to keep it going. Literally, you know, it's unbelievable. And we did not get cut, but that is not, I am here with my peers that have been here a long time, and I've seen the journey and the evolution of this arts community. I'm a great believer in the cultural diversity and the incredible work that's happened here. But funding 99% of new applicants is not real. When you are at the NEA level, it makes it really ridiculous. You can apply 4, 5, 6, 7 times to the NEA before you're funded, if that. And this to have gone to this extreme is not healthy for our community. You know, I was funded by the NEA before I was funded by the City of Austin. So I'm asking you to look at what the vision and mission is and how we go forward now. And I am not about us and them. I am completely for this evolving arts community and want to see it flourish more than it is, but with some common sense here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jamie Bancroft, Austin International Drag Foundation, followed by, Christy Lotz.
Hi, I'm Jamie Bancroft. I'm with the Austin International Drag Foundation. This is my first time being at one of these. This is pretty amazing. I really appreciate the hard work that you all do. I don't know how you do it. It's crazy. I started the Austin International Drag Foundation because drag performers are a minority amongst the arts community, and I feel like there is significant reason why we need to support the drag artist community and elevate them to the status of being seen as real artists and not just a sideshow act in a gay bar. So I created the Austin International Drag Festival to give the drag community a chance to be seen as legitimate artists by the public and to present to the world that they deserve to be seen and to be respected. This is our 4th year doing the festival, and in these 4 years, we have been able to garner the respect of the arts community and the general public, and I'm seeing a change in the tide and the way people perceive drag, and we've placed Austin, Texas as kind of the center of the drag universe. It's pretty amazing. People all over the world now knows about Austin being a place where you can go to see great drag, and where we respect our artists. We respect all artists, and I appreciate the funding that you've given us over these last 4 years. You've been able to assist me in really building our mission, and a cut in funding in general will hurt the festival, will hurt the foundation, will hurt our drag artists that need to be elevated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Christy, did I get that right? Christy Lotz, Ballet Austin. Donald Dixon from Tapestry, followed by Asia Gray. Are you both speaking, or are you donating time?
Oh, no, I signed you up.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Don Dixon, and I am the past president of the Board of Directors of Tapestry Dance Company. I served on Tapestry's board from 2007 to 2015 and was president of the Board of Directors from 2011 to 2015. I was utterly shocked when I read last week that our funding had been cut by 26% to by a total of $49,500. In my last year as president of Tapestry, we gave out $42,000 in scholarships. That's gone. That's off the table. We had 300 children dancing in our academy, and that was the year we lost our space. I used to lie awake nights wondering how we were going to have $14,000 by the first of the month, and we ultimately lost our space. And when you change parameter number 3, decreasing the percent of our budget, you're penalizing us for losing our space. And I'm happy to tell you that we have a new space, a very exciting new space. And I hope that we get back to the point where we have another 300 children dancing in our academy. I'm bewildered at how a pot of money that was escalating rapidly over a period of years is suddenly decreased. I look around this town and I see hotels going up 20, 30, 40-story hotels, and I see all of these SRTs. How can we possibly have less money to distribute to these organizations? I'm bewildered by it. And I got to tell you that all of these organizations, ours and everyone else, we are very sensitive to fluctuations in our financial condition. If you're going to change our funding, you've got to do it incrementally. Don't pop it on us with a week's notice that you're cutting us by $49,000. We have deliverables. We dance for 20,000 AISD students every year. And we have to do that now on $49,000 less. That's one of our deliverables. That's one of our promises to the city for that money. We also give that money to other grantees. We give that money to the Long Center. We give that money to the Minor Mishap Band. We give that money to Zell Miller. We hire dancers and we plan performances a year in advance. Please treat us better. Thank you very much for your time.
I can't say much after that, Don. Thank you. I want to thank you. I want to thank my friends and my fellow artists and my fellow executive directors and artistic directors, because we are a community. And Sally, that means so much to me. Because we are all in this together, and we support each other. And a lot of us have been here a long time, supporting a lot of people. Let us keep doing that.
Thank you, everyone. So I guess we'll go back to the item, discussion, possible action on the revised fiscal year 19 funding matrix and allocations. Commissioners are recusing themselves from this discussion. Commissioner Fonte.
Question about the equity modifier. I was trying to understand whether it's for core and project support 1 and 2 and 3 and cultural heritage festivals and everything. It was confusing the way.
Sure. So we have a couple of equity modifiers. The culturally specific marketing supplement is available for everybody. Core, organizational support, project support 1, 2, and 3, and cultural heritage festivals. The Alana modifier is only for the core funding recipients, not for the cultural heritage festivals program recipients.
So somebody who's a project 3 or project 2 is not eligible for a 10% equity modifier? Is that what you're saying?
No, they are. So core is organizational support, project support 1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
So everybody except for cultural heritage festivals recipients are eligible for that.
Was there a reason that the cultural heritage festivals were not eligible for it? Because there would be some Alana organizations in that. They seem to be being penalized for being cultural heritage festivals as opposed to being a core applicant, which I thought was one of the things we were trying to avoid.
So it's because it's funded based on their previous festival budget, and it accounts for the 25% in kind, and so we have not traditionally done. That's something we can look at in the future, but it's not something we've traditionally done to date.
And that equity modifier includes differently abled communities and LGBTQIA?
For the culturally specific marketing supplement, yes.
But not for core?
But not for the 10% modifier, no.
Okay.
Commissioner Barnes.
Just as we're looking at all of the changes, which, again, just thank you to the working group, because I heard through your numerous meetings, and it was an arduous task. So thank you all for undertaking that. Was it ever decided to look at changing the initial threshold of getting funded? Because I would assume, and again, not that, I mean, we want to be as transparent as possible, some of those groups would not have been notified if they've been funded or not yet, because they are under the city's guidelines of that being notified, because that doesn't have to go to council. So was there talk of that, or was it, no, we need to honor what we initially put out there and move forward with that recommendation of 99% getting funded?
So you're referring to the score?
Right, the threshold of the 75, which 421 out of 427 or whatever that number was got made.
So our guidelines specifically state that if you score a 75 or higher, you can receive funding. And so the funding working group guiding principle number 1 is to be consistent with the application guidelines.
Okay. Thank you. So that wasn't an option for this round, but it is something that we could look at in language moving forward. And again, I know we're going to look at a variety of different things, but that was the reason why that was not looked at as an option for increased funding in other areas.
Commissioner Polgar and then Garza.
So to be clear, all questions were on the table. So we did look at it, and we had a long discussion about exactly that and about those guidelines that we had to abide by through the course of the conversation.
And yes, we the only people who have been notified of any of the monies are those who have received the letters who are getting over 50,000. So we have not heard from both sides. We're only hearing from one side, you guys here. So what the opinions of the other folks are, we have no idea. What the opinions of the folks who perhaps might have qualified for the funds that were cut, we have no idea. We're only hearing one side, your side.
But I would like to remind Commissioner Garza that there have been other communications happening as well. So perhaps publicly at our meetings, we have heard from the group here today, but we have heard from everyone, or representation of everyone.
I have another question, if you don't mind.
Commissioner Barnes?
The Tempo project, which as I serve as the AIPP representative, being reduced to 150,000, has the AIPP staff been able to weigh in on that? Is it able to sustain at least some semblance of a program by reducing it to that level?
Yes, Sue Lamb, the program administrator, or the manager for art and public places, was part of our discussion for one of the working groups.
Okay.
And she was able to provide options for how that program could be scaled and still maintain a commitment to the core tenets of what that program stands for.
Thank you. I appreciate that, because again, if we're looking at money going directly to artists, that program does that for often a community that isn't represented or doesn't have other opportunities to raise money. So thank you all for checking on that aspect.
To remind you that I did serve 6 years on AIPP.
Yeah.
And that was not an easy suggestion for me to make to Sue.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I have a question.
Commissioner Reeves?
Can staff just clarify the tourism promotion? So that was 250,000 down to 78,000. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, that's a line item that's set aside for the implementation of the cultural tourism plan, which was formulated, crafted a couple years ago, and we've been implementing the recommendations of that since then. This would just scale that implementation back.
So, sorry.
Commissioner Barnes?
So just so I'm understanding it, we have then identified, or the working group identified, an additional $1 million to go back in, or what was the total amount that we are actually putting back into that we put back into the pot?
Can I follow up on that question? Can the working group just give a summary of what you've come up with?
So, to reiterate, we took the 5% reserve.
Right.
We made cuts to community initiatives. We made cuts to Tempo. We made cuts to tourism and promotion. There was funding left over there was funding not spent from fiscal year 18. We took that money and put it in. We looked at our tourism and promotion plan for fiscal year 19. There were some funds already allocated, but the remainder, we took that and added it. What am I missing? Right, we had the UNESCO program.
It's the fourth page of your handout, or up on the screen there.
Oh, thank you. Sorry.
I thought we had cut Faces of Austin too. I don't see
Commissioner
that.
Polgar.
So also, I just want to point out that if you look at the breakdown on the back of your packet, when we started the first matrix conversation, we already cut programs in that first round. So community initiatives started at 625, went to 500, we're now down to 3. Tempo started at $250,000, was down to 215, is now down to 150. So we've been continuing to sort of monitor and wage how we could possibly put as much money as possible back into the pot. We are aware and listening and paying attention, and we're doing our level best to try to make this work for everybody. The other thing that I want to say is that the equity lens has been a piece that we have also looked at throughout all of this. The programs that we are, part of the reason we're in the situation we're in is because we've been so mindful and so thoughtful about how we've dealt with trying to fund Alana groups and trying to provide access to organizations that have historically sort of had barriers to entry into these funding programs. So that has been successful and positive, but is also part of the pain that we're feeling right now. as we looked at this, we also were looking at percentages of increases across different communities within the city and trying to maintain that and support that as we move forward.
Commissioner Flores?
Just to add to that, we did our level best to, decrease the pain and spread this across the board as best we could with the equity lens in mind and understanding that, it's never easy to receive cuts in funding, and we were trying to mitigate that, the impact of that, and based on, the limitations that we had, the amount of money that we had, we did our best to mitigate the losses to those groups who had felt it the hardest. And so, these are the results, and it's because we are honoring, the parameters that we are set with this year, which we've used in years past. Looking forward, we can look at a lot of the recommendations and ideas that you all are posing about possible ways to improve our parameters, et cetera. So we are listening, and we will do our best before we create the funding for the future.
Commissioner Barnes?
Sorry. So again, slow. Can somebody then just tell me, I would just want to make sure I'm understanding, no group now is receiving a cut larger than 11% from last year's funding?
Correct. From their FY18 core or cultural heritage festivals funding only, not counting their culturally specific marketing supplement.
So groups that have told us they're getting a 48 or whatever, now that's been mitigated to an 11% cut. It's still a cut, but it's 11% as opposed to what it had been before. There are some other groups that might be getting a bump in revenue or opportunities, and then we cut those other programs down to probably bare bones. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding. 11% is the largest cut anybody would be sustaining.
Correct.
For this year.
Correct.
I was just
Commissioner
looking
Garza?
through the slides. On this one, you show Faces of Austin getting cut. Then on this big sheet, you don't show Faces of Austin getting cut. Which one's correct?
It stayed at 15,000.
Okay.
So as a reminder, in July, we made that initial cut from fiscal year 18 from 25 to 15.
So we cut $10,000 off Faces of Austin.
Back in July.
Okay.
I would move that we accept the funding recommendations by the working group and recommend them to City Council for approval.
Motion made by Commissioner Barnes to accept the recommendation from the Funding Matrix Working Group.
Second.
Seconded by Flores. I want to take this moment to remind commissioners that at last meeting, I asked you, I challenged you to make sure to listen to everyone speaking to us. That's not limited to our meetings. If someone reaches out to you, please listen to them. Cuts are scary. Like I said last time, these are paychecks, these are livelihoods, these are our friends. And we hear the suggestions of other factors of this process. Our challenge was to mitigate the cuts, and that's what we're addressing tonight with this recommendation. We are committing to further our conversations. We do recognize that there was concerns about the panel process this year. I think the best way to address those is by through conversations, and staff has already committed to these conversations and to these looking for solutions. At the last meeting, I also challenged the audience to watch us. It doesn't end tonight. We have a meeting the third Monday in October, and every third Monday after that. Join us, speak to us, tell us where it hurts, because that's how we're going to figure this out together. Commissioner Polgar.
So I just want to say that as a member of the working group, I went into this conversation knowing exactly what you guys are saying, which is that every percentage cut is a salary line, right? That these are people and these are lives, and this is really important. And so my top priority was to see how far we could mitigate the losses. And in a perfect world, I would have loved to see that down to the FY18 numbers, which was far more money than we had at our disposal. But know that we fought to get it as to put that safety net as close to that original cap as we possibly could. And I want to say thank you to my other committee members. This was hard work. Thank you to staff. Some of this stuff was really, really difficult and very emotional for all of us. So I just want you to know how committed we are and how much we are listening. And there's a lot of work to do. You know, this is sort of a triage effort at the moment, but this is going to continue. We are a growing community. It's really exciting, the amount of work that's being generated and the number of artists that are coming out and that are able to share their work with the entire community. That's great stuff. Our pot is finite. It will grow barely, but we also have a lot of other folks and a lot of other things that are working to try to pull money out of that. We need to be all working together and be aware and be a community that's supporting each other. So as we come back to looking at the matrix and looking at funding, there are lots of conversations that we need to have, and you guys need to be in the room, and not just in the room for our meetings, but in working groups, spending your time really digging in at what our priorities are as a community for funding, what our goals are, what our long-term vision looks like. We all need to be part of that conversation together. And thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for voicing your opinion and sharing your passion and creating this amazing work. I'm honored to be here and work with you all. Thanks.
Commissioner Garza.
Thank you all for being here. I wish those 100 new applicants who are getting money would also have been here. And that's part of the reason that, and you guys might think that 100 new artists or art organizations, whatever, are a lot, and they are a lot, but we intentionally did that. We went out as an arts commission and we looked at our demographic numbers and we realized that some of those demographic numbers do not represent the community of Austin. They simply don't. You look right here, right now, you guys do not represent the community of Austin. And we looked at those numbers and we wanted to bump up particularly the minority folks. And in this application process, we got the highest number of minority applicants that we ever had before. It didn't really change the percentage because we also had everyone else applied. So, you know, don't be surprised that we got 100 new folks. We knew we were going to get 100 new folks. We had workshops for new folks to apply so they could get some of the same advantages that you guys got in their application process. So we're really proud about that. Now, in order for you guys to get that money, and you guys are the guys who get the top 50,000 and above, we had to make some cuts to some organizations, some of the fundings that we normally get. Like we said, we cut Faces of Austin, we cut Community Initiatives, we cut Tempo. And you guys should know what those organizations are, what those funding programs are. Like a gentleman just said way back there in the green shirt, who does the murals at the schools, he started off in Community Initiatives. That is one of our base, lowest entry-level programs. And that's for folks who don't have the advantages you guys got. We cut Tempo. Our AIPP pool of qualified artists is fairly small. And that's for folks like, let's say, the airport, which gets a $250,000 piece of artwork every few years. We cut that. And those are the folks who aren't going to be having new jobs. You guys saved your jobs. That's pretty cool. You know, you guys got a lot of power. You guys got a lot of influence. And in fact, that's what I was told at our planning meeting.
Commissioner Garza.
Hold on, I'm not finished yet.
Commissioner Garza, I do want to call the vote.
I'm not finished yet.
Call the question.
Please wrap it up, because I do want
All
to call
right,
the vote.
fine. Now, you guys did get funding. You guys did get your money. And when we look at a pyramid of the financing of the city of Austin, we've got those at the bottom, and we got those at the very top. At the very, very top of arts organizations, there are no black organizations in that. There are no Asians, only one Hispanic. You guys represent 3%, and you're 91% white. The other 15%, I would say,
Commissioner Garza.
are those groups who fund absolutely no one but yourselves.
Commissioner Garza,
You do not
we have
sponsor any
business to
arts
attend to.
organizations.
Commissioner Garza.
All right. That's just my statement. It was not
Can I call the vote?
Now, I said 15%.
I call for a return to order, please.
You do.
Commissioner
A lot of you
Garza?
do.
I call for a
Thank
return
you.
to order.
Thank you. Motion on the table is to approve I'm sorry. So Novi, did you have a comment? Thank you. Approve the recommendation by the Matrix, the Funding Matrix Working Group, seconded by Flores, or motion made by Barnes, seconded by Flores. All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. So Novia, did you have a comment?
Yes. I just wanted to personally thank the Arts Commission Working Group, and staff for doing a yeoman's job. It is not easy. I applaud you for doing the best you can with the resources you have, and that the executive team for economic development, we are committed to walking forward with you on evaluating the matrix, holding community stakeholder meetings, and hearing from our communities. But know that economic development is committed to moving forward together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fonte.
And I just want to remind everybody in the room, because it didn't come up at the meeting prior, we do have a working group dedicated to funding responsiveness, which is going to be looking at these issues on the longer term so we can solve some of these problems and hopefully give a lot more of a lead time of any sort of cuts. And that's why I'm very glad we were able to do something to minimize the cuts down to 11%. I think that really helps everybody across the board, all organizations. So.
Commissioner Flores.
And in addition to that long-term committee, we also have an equity committee, a working group that is looking at equity issues, and that also includes the peer panel process, et cetera, and how the makeup of those. And those will be feeding into the larger working group long-term ideas. So we are definitely do have and continue to have a lens towards equity, and it continues to be a priority for me and all my fellow commissioners. And so with that, we say thank you, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Announcements?
Just very quickly, I want to thank everyone who has responded to my emails with suggestions, comments, ideas, and feedback. Please keep it coming. I want to be available to you. I pledge to continue to keep the emails coming in your direction. And that holds true between now and council approval on October 4th. I will be continuing to keep you updated as we move forward. And anything that is posted publicly for that meeting, I'll share the link immediately when I have it. So thank you all.
Unless there's any other business to tend to.
Just one comment. I want to invite everybody to the Asian Resource Center this Saturday for the Persian Festival. Hopefully they'll be really successful, and maybe next year we're going to have a new Cultural Heritage Festival group as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Move to adjourn. Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.